Dr. Jazz.
Uh, First of all, thanks for finding the time. Appreciate it.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
you said it's coinciding with your new record, and I mean, I wanted to start the talk with some other records you did, but let's start with this one. You said I don't know what it is, but you said you have a new one coming out, and
Yeah.
what
So
what is
first,
it?
tell me the correct pronunciation of your first name.
Oh, Samo.
Samo. Okay,
Samo,
because
yeah.
we were to Samo. That's what I thought. Uh, so yeah, it's nice to talk with you and be here, and I think
Yeah.
I'm good. Yeah. So just by chance, this record is coming out November 9th.
Oh, wow, okay.
It
Fantastic.
was exactly a year after that it had its world premiere at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto.
Oh,
So it was commissioned by the Aga Khan Museum for the opening of an art show that I was involved with. I did the sound for it, the music for it. So the art show is interesting. It was by an artist, a London-based artist named Shahzad Daoud, who's a wonderful visual artist, and he had made a multimedia art show inspired by and including art by Yusef Lateef.
oh,
It
wow,
was
beautiful.
inspired by a novel Yusef wrote called Night in the Garden of Love, which is an amazing sort of futuristic science fiction spiritual allegory that Yusuf wrote. Uh, and so, uh, uh, um, so Shazab made this beautiful show. There's a whole VR part
Oh,
where
wow.
we used my music with Yusuf, and then we created a lot of music for the show, the exhibition. With there was a surrounded. It's hard to describe, but it was a very it was a fantastic show. So anyway, so for the opening, they asked, they like, what kind of playlist do you want? And I said, well, never mind a playlist. I'll create the music. So
Okay.
the music that sort of was playing kind of in the background. It's my first, I won't call it ambient music because I end up, it could be ambient, but it's also very engaging if you decide to listen to it. There's a lot of detail, a lot of form. There is form. There's, but it's one long piece, 43
Mm.
minutes, and it's called Autumn Moon Meditation. So it's used for meditation. People use it, but also I've had a few friends who have used it for their psilocybin mushroom trips
Mm. Okay.
because, well, a lot of times the music, people are like, what's the music? And sometimes not every music is the right
Oh,
music. So this music is also for that too.
fantastic. Beautiful, man. So it's basically just you solo.
Yeah, I did all the, like a lot of people starting in COVID, I already I have a recording studio here.
Yeah.
So for many years, I do a lot of recording, like overdub type things. I do projects for different musicians, but also my own. And then I do all my editing and pre-mixing. And then I take it, Bill Laswell Studios about 15 minutes away. I do a lot of recording sessions for him.
Mm.
And then I get to use the studio, and James Della Tacoma does my mixes. But I do a lot of the preparatory work at home. So this one, I recorded, and actually I'm working on another record that's sort of similar, although it'll have more other people. Now this does have, I'm not the only one on this record because there's um, uh, 324 Chinese crickets are on the record also.
Yeah.
That I had done a concert with them with an artist named Lars Friedrichsen had brought these crickets to Stockholm. This was years ago when I was touring with my moving pictures group.
Hmm.
And at the Stockholm Museum, we did a concert with these crickets.
Oh,
So now I have the crickets are on the record, and I didn't pay them union scale.
good. It's too many.
It's that kind of record though. If you can, it's very
Yeah, sure.
creative, but you can listen in the background, or you can sit and listen to everything. Because with all my records, I love when I do the mixing and editing. I'm very, very into detail
Mm,
work. You know,
yeah,
everything is careful, thought about,
yeah.
intentional.
It's a story. Yeah, I mean, I get this sense. Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Fantastic. Looking forward to that. Always nice to hear new music from you. But I wanted to also ask you, like, uh, you've done so much work with another friend of mine and great percussionist and drummer, Tyshawn Sorey, and recently a couple of records came out, with different constellations. What's your story with Tyshawn? How did you guys meet and hook up and start playing together?
Oh, I know how. So I've had a trio with Dave Liebman,
Yeah,
the great saxophonist, and we've sort of had a rotating drum. It's percussion and Dave, and there's been kind of a rotating drum chair. So we did one record with Tatsuya Nakatani and one record with Hamid Drake.
yeah,
And then I don't know, Tyshawn and we've just known we see each other. He's interested in what I do. I'm interested in what he does. We respect each other. His mentor at school is George Lewis, who
yeah.
went to high school with George. I've known George since the 60s.
Oh, really? Oh, well. Okay.
And so we had a concert coming up, and I invited him, and he played. So that concert has been released. Also, it's called New Now. And then we did this other concert, just a duet. We
Yeah.
decided to do a duet concert. So, and the guy who runs that label, Defcaz, Giannis, I don't know, he saw the video of it on YouTube. He knew about me because he had released a record that Bill had produced that I played on. That's how he knew about me. But then he saw the video and he wanted to release the duet. And then Tyshawn and I were invited to do this composers series called Interpretations at Roulette in New York.
Mhm.
And we decided to invite three other sort of, quote, classical type percussionists. And so we did that concert, and
Yeah.
we released that. So so that one involved us playing, but also taking turns conducting. Tyshawn also has his spontaneous conducting methodology, and I have mine, as you might know, about
Yeah, sure.
organic orchestra since
Yeah.
the 90s. Actually, I've been doing Go Organic Orchestra. So we each did some conducting and some playing, and I played piano and he played piano. He played drum kit and I played my electronics and percussion. And Sei Hashimoto and Russell Greenberg from Yarn Wire played, and then Levi uh, from
Lorenzo.
Ice.
Yeah, Level Lorenzo.
Lorenzo, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
from I think he's from Ice. He played also. So they were so great. They
Yeah, it's a
totally
beautiful one.
knew what we were doing, and it was a really. I'm very happy with how both those records came out.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, it's a nice addition to what you've done. I'll put it like that. It's different. I mean, I love Tyshawn, what he's doing, of course, as a composer, but here he has to play different, and it's nice to hear him in such other context with you as well. And beautiful, nice stuff.
But the idea when you one thing I like about playing with Tyshawn and musicians like that who when they're open, and then there's a desire to learn, listen, exchange, and try new things. That's a wonderful quality that I look for in all the musicians that I collaborate with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Somebody who's seeking for something, looking for something. Yeah. And he listens, and he has a great imagination. You know, he
Absolutely.
was great. His, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic player. Yeah. I had a tour with him like in 2003 or four. He was still like one of his first tours in Europe, and I wrote really complex music back then, like
Okay.
10 pages of odd meters constantly changing. And like on the
Right.
second gig, he didn't need any sheet music anymore. I was like, man, Ty, are you sure? Yeah, yeah, don't worry. And he
Yeah.
nailed it, of course. I'm like, damn, man, it was crazy what he did, really.
I know he's really gifted that he's just really
Yeah,
like a gifted that way for sure. Yeah, just an
incredible.
amazing musician, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So we're gonna
yeah.
play together again. I'm bringing several groups this year to the Big Ears Festival in Knoxville.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
Uh, uh, we found out we were both going to be there. Tyshawn's doing some projects, and so we decided to do a duet concert there. And then I'm presenting my new quartet called the Sunrise Quartet. We just and we just played at Roulette a couple weeks ago, and we have a record that I'm working on that we've already
Fantastic.
recorded, and then also my Who Vibrational group, which is my I'm sort of dialing in more and more the conceptual idea of that with this idea of sort of this sound. I call it sonic mandala idea of this
Mm,
circularity in the music and a different kind of way of improvising that's sort of the opposite of what a lot of people uh, are doing these days, with a lot of notes and a lot of generating forms
yeah,
spontaneous. These are forms that are generated from my concept, that I call cyclic verticalism that I've used for years. And
mm,
they're musicians who know my music really well. They've all played in my Go Organic Orchestra, and in my moving pictures group. So we really dialed in kind of. So that's a cool record too. We went in the studio.
fantastic.
So I'm actually backed up. And then I just did a recording session the other day with Andre 3000, who's I play with some. Do you know that person?
That's yeah.
You know the group Outcast?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, exactly. I thought I didn't want to say yes because it sounded like too weird of you how you connected, but yeah, okay,
Nothing's too weird.
okay.
Right? Music is music. Anyway, I have all this music in the. I have a chamber orchestra piece that I'm
Wow,
mixing, so I'm all backed up with projects to release
that's
now.
fantastic.
That's
Yeah,
good. Yeah, so I'm in a good place right now.
that's beautiful, man. Yeah. I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the Go Organic Orchestra already, and being a guitarist, I love the guitar version you did like 3 years ago or something like that. And but what's the story behind this concept? And when you started it in the 90s, how come you decided to go that path? And how did you develop it through the years? And especially I've read about it, of course. I mean, but like if you generalize it for someone who's listening now or watching.
So Go Organic Orchestra, I started in the late 1990s in when I was living in Venice, California. I lived there for almost 20 years.
Oh,
And I moved out there actually to work with Don Cherry, who was living there at that time. Anyway, that's a story. But I felt like I had gotten to a place where there were a lot of musicians who were wanting to play with me and learn, from me because I had the great good fortune to be a generation that was initiated and brought into this music as part of the oral tradition. So,
yeah.
starting in Chicago with Fred Anderson and Malawi Nerudeen,
Mm,
and Detroit with Charles Moore and Kenny Cox, and then Don Cherry and Pharaoh Sanders, and then most importantly was my 25 years with Yusef Lateef.
yeah,
So, and worked with many other great musicians, but that was very important. And so, but the scene is different now, and so on the one hand, I was thinking about how I could share the music, and these musicians who were coming up to me uh, at gigs and this here I would meet were from very different kinds of backgrounds, kind of like so-called classically trained musicians and people who've been studying Indian and African music, and then so-called jazz players. Um, and at the same time, I've always loved orchestral music.
Mm.
Kaya Sarajevo and Toru Takamitsu and Bartok and the usual
Yeah.
WC, and also large ensembles like Dizzy Gillespie and so on.
Mm.
And then one of my favorite records was Relativity Suite, that was Don Cherry's large.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
So uh, I was in residence at the first all solar powered theater in California called the Electric Lodge because it's on Electric Avenue, and so I was on the board there, and it was a beautiful black box theater. So I started I put together some concerts, and we did it totally without funding or just from the love of it. And the one of the concepts of it was that the instrumentation could be flexible, so that if people could come one time but they couldn't come another time, and also to reach out to musicians from all of these backgrounds, all genders, all so-called racial, everybody ages. So like I had Benny Maupin has always been a member of the group. And then I had this young kid, Austin, another super talented young kid who was 14, and everybody in between. Sometimes I'd have 6 bass players, sometimes there'd be no bass players. But we did series of concerts over the years. When I moved back here to New York, I should say that sort of culminated. We did one concert where I invited Yusef to come and co-compose a piece with me, which is that record that's called "In the Garden." It's a
Yeah.
double.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, when I came here, I put together a Go Organic Orchestra here, and I've been doing it. So that's since 2005 or
Yeah.
2008, something like that. And so my New York orchestra, but also I go all over the world. Well, before the pandemic, I haven't yet, but I'm going to go to Copenhagen in February. I go all over the world and teach it. So I do residencies where I spend a few days with whatever. Sometimes it's a symphony orchestra, like I was in
Mm.
Copenhagen Orchestra or the Palermo Orchestra. Sometimes it's a pickup group. Sometimes it's a university. Doesn't matter the instrumentation, and I spend some time, and then they learn the concept, and but it's different than the conduction that Butch does, and it's because it involves some score materials
Okay.
that are, and that's a whole other conversation, but that I use as those are kind of what I would describe as the DNA that I can create the music spontaneously with. So because the problem was, okay, so then that's sort of the social reason. And then the other reason was I was always been interested in orchestral music. And it's always the question of, as you know, and probably everybody knows, the more musicians you have, the more there can be a challenge to like play
Sure.
spontaneously, right? A solo or duet or trio, quartet even, but 30 people, 20 people, 15 people, how do you, and how do you, the issue is always, how do you direct the music? For me, the question was, how do I create a process where I can focus the music functionally and aesthetically in a very clear way and still allow as much freedom for the musicians
Yeah.
bring their spirit and their inner voice in the moment. And that's always been the relationship that I've been working on.
Mhm. How have you achieved that through the years? I mean, or how have you started with this to juggle this freedom within the kind of concept of what you're doing?
I have there's a 3-page score that is on people's music stand all the time. That's based upon what I call intervallic cosmograms and matrices. And then there's a page of what I call ostinatos of circularity, which are rhythm patterns that are so then I have, over the years, I've just developed very simple intuitive hand signals.
Yeah.
I want it to be as simple as possible, but so if I hold up 3 fingers, that means we go to matrix number 3, and then within that there's everything from just generating your own ideas in this intervallic matrix or cosmogram to very specific things of reading left to right, down, across, ways that I can make unbelievable amounts of different combinations. But each matrix and cosmogram has its own character. One of the things that for me is became boring for me was that in the improv, is the so-called improv, that people invariably always seem to end up with some kind of 12 tones going on all the time.
Yeah.
And as somebody who studied North Indian classical music for a couple decades, I'm very interested in the idea of what can happen inside of a raga or a rasa, what they call a rasa, which is the coloration of the raga, emotional coloration. Like, for example, you might find in a blues, let's say, right? So each of the matrices and cosmograms have their own intellectual rationale, but they also have their own aesthetic imperative for being, which is intuitive. I decide. Yeah. But then the people bring it to life. So like a cosmogram, like a cosmogram you might find in the Congo, that it's a two-dimensional set of relationships between things that become activated when a human being interacts with them, and that becomes highly personal. So it's very much, I won't say the opposite, but very different idea than a lot of people use, like graphic notation, like play this shape or play, red means this or whatever, this kind of, these designs. This is sort of the opposite. This gives you a sense of the intervallic and rhythmic arena in which we're all talking about, like the topic. Now we're talking about Go Organic Orchestra, but we could talk about the weather. So it gives you the topic, but what everybody has to say about the topic is themselves. So it's valuable because it allows the musicians to bring their own phraseology, their own aesthetic sensibility to the moment. So, like a rock guitarist could be playing with a classical oboist, and it works because they're all dealing with, like, let's say a symmetric hexatonic scale, for example. You see? So
interesting.
Yeah.
Quite cool. Yeah. Basically, then every concert, when you release all these albums, like basically you could release every concert almost, because it's a story in its own, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, well, of course, every concert is everything. Every concert's going to be its own
story. Yeah, different. Yeah,
moment, which is how we all operate in this.
Of course.
Yeah. I don't use the word improvisation, and I don't use the word jazz. I like to use, talking about my music, I like the word, the functionality of what we do is called spontaneous composition.
Yep.
And also I call my music organic music. So
Yeah.
that's my...
that's a good term, actually,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's going to have they're talking about AI, but I'm into OI, organic intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm all for AI. I'm not cool with it, but for what we do, organic intelligence, because the organic intelligence goes back a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Adam, you mentioned Dawn before, Cherry, and you guys go way back, right? What's your story with Dawn?
So it's interesting you mentioned that because there's a record label that's going to release the first concert I ever did with Don
Oh wow, man.
and the first concert I ever did in Europe. Don was the first person who gave me the opportunity to play in Europe. It was in 1978
Wow,
in
already.
Paris at the Opera Athénée with Charlie Hayden and Trilak Gurtu and Hamid Drake.
Woo, man, beautiful.
So the way that came about, it's not to back up too far, but I lived in Ghana for a year in 1977.
Oh,
I met Fode Musa Suso, the kora player,
oh yeah, yeah. Okay.
who came to Ljubljana with,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
and he's from the Gambia. He's a griot kora player, and we came back to the U.S. together. And in 1978, we started the first, actually late 77, the first group that I know about that was really mixing this kora music and a lot of West African music with sort of rhythm and blues and jazz. So he and I put that group together. And when we had an opportunity to make a record, I spoke to the label. And that next summer, I said, you think can we invite Don Cherry to play on this record? Because I was already had all his records. He was like a great hero who was using, quote, world music. I was already into playing conga and tablas and this and that. And, I grew up around the art ensemble, all these people. I was very open to this. And they said yes.
Mm.
And I don't remember how I got Don's number, but I called him up. I said, you want to come? He was in Sweden. And he said, sure. And he came. He played on the record. He stayed with me, and we had a beautiful time together. Really nice. And then he said, "Do you guys want to come and do some concerts? Stay in my house in Sweden and learn music, and we'll do some concerts."
Mm.
And we're like, "Yes." So we went.
Oh, amazing.
So we spent the summer, a couple months at his house, the schoolhouse that he and Moki had, and I learned a little bit about gardening. I was a city boy. And we played music round the clock, and then we did these concerts. And then I worked with Don on and off for many years. As I said, he was one of the reasons I ended up staying in Los Angeles. In '79, he had moved there. And so I went out there to visit Charles Moore and started doing a lot of sessions, and Don was there. So we started doing a lot of duet concerts and ensemble
Oh,
concerts.
beautiful.
He was part of the reason I got sort of stuck there. I mean, I loved it there. It was cool.
Mm.
I'm
Fantastic.
glad
Yeah, amazing. Oh, when is this record coming out? You know, by any chance?
No, right now they're getting the clearance from all the musicians.
Okay.
The label that put out, they recently put out another thing with Don and Charlie Hayden and this drummer from Japan. I think it's a British label.
Okay, I'll try to find it.
They just released that Black Artist Group record too.
Okay, so
Anyway,
beautiful.
so they're getting, it's done. I mean, it was a live record. It's a beautiful sounding recording, and it's going to be great because it also kind of fills in a gap of Don's. There's nothing really like from '78 right around. I mean, there's Cardona
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
doing on his own, and it's really good. I have to say, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And Hamid you met in Chicago, right? Drake, when you
Yeah, I
were
mean,
there.
when we were 14 in a drum store in downtown Chicago. And it's so funny. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in an area called Hyde Park where the art ensemble lived and Steve McCall lived a couple doors
Oh yeah.
down. Red Gill lived down the street. They were all my neighbors. So I knew all of them. I'm younger, but I heard them. And then Hamid grew up out in the suburbs. And of course, he grew up with Fred Anderson. But we met in a drum store when we were 14.
Oh wow. So he hooked you up also with Fred that you started playing
So
with him, or?
I met Fred through one of the great tenor players from Chicago that people don't know about, named Malawi Nerudin.
Oh,
And Malawi, many great musicians came through Malawi's band, like Jerome Cooper and Jack DeJohnette and Rufus Reed. And he was one of the great kind of in between Gene Ammons and the AACM. He was and he made one record where he's only playing soprano.
I have to find him.
So
Okay.
Fred used to come in. He and Fred were really tight. So Fred used to come and sit in with us. That's how I know Fred.
Yeah, I love Fred, man. He's like one of the most underrated players.
Well, we
More,
did that record in 1979 called The
yeah,
Mist.
I know. Yeah, I know.
That was, yeah, that was.
With Hamid,
So
yeah.
we started playing together with Hamid, and we did a lot of things together. Yeah.
Fantastic. Wow. What about Yusef? I know you've played together, like you said, like more than 20 years, 25 years. And uh, how did you connect with Yusef? And, stupid question, but what did you learn from him? Like, how was he like to you, like in a sense, as a band leader, or probably then later as a friend also, but
Yeah, he was an important mentor and like kind of father figure. He was older than
mm,
my, and like also a really close family friend. We became really close. I was really close with his wife Tahira, and uh, she and my wife got close. So I met Yusuf when I went to California. Let's see, how do I start? So my second school, I would say I went to school on the south side of Chicago, but my second school was in Detroit because I met Charles Moore, the great, who had the contemporary jazz quintet with Kenny Cox, and he started inviting me to Detroit. So I started playing in Detroit when I was 17.
oh, wow.
So it was like a second, and I learned very different kinds of things and approach. They had an organization called Strata, and they had Strata Records, from which Strata East came out of. And Charles was a really brilliant and generous musician. So he had moved to Los Angeles. So when I went out there to work with Don, he was there also. And he and I started a quartet called Eternal Wind. And we put out 3 LPs that are actually, they're going to be re-released now. They're also, I mean, the first one is 1982. If you go
Oh, okay.
listen to it, you think it was recorded tomorrow. I mean, it's very, very different, very. So we did 3 records, and then Yusuf had just moved back he had been living in Nigeria for 4 years, and he came back and teaching and recording. And he came back, I think, in 86.
Mm,
And I think he heard about us, or we connected to him through Kenny Cox. Anyway, he heard our records, and he asked us to do a concert with him. He didn't want to really have a band like bass, drums, and piano. I mean, Eternal Wind, I'm playing all this percussion, and there's a wonderful guitarist from Uruguay, and Ralph Jones is playing
yeah.
multi-winds, and Charles is playing multi-brass, so it's not like a bass drum. It's not a, quote, jazz orchestration. He really liked what we were doing, so he invited us to do a concert with him in 1988 at Symphony Space. At that time, I was living in Don Cherry's loft, actually. Don and Moki were away for the summer. I'd sublet their loft. So we actually rehearsed in Don's loft.
Mm,
CCB played bass with us. And we played, Yusuf was so cool. He played a lot of my compositions on the concert. And that was the beginning, of, I think I ended up doing, I don't know, many, many, many concerts with him,
sure.
different ensembles. But the last 10 years, mostly duet concerts. We did a duet concert tour in Europe when he was
Beautiful.
90. We did a lot of, I probably played on 20 or 30 of his records, somewhere in that amount.
Okay.
And we did about 6 collaborative records too that we did, where we co-composed the music.
Mm,
So what I learned so much from Yusuf about, musical things, but also I think more importantly was sort of this, I always talk about the sort of the what and the how and the why, and the why, the what is what people do, how is how they do it, and why is the mysticism of it. So a lot of what I learned from Yusef, it was sort of a more of a not didactic, but about creative attitude, sort of initiatory, that kind of thing. But he was, I learned, I learned he was very humble,
Yeah.
very studious, uh, kind to everybody he was in contact with. He was always trying to do something he had never done before. So this is kind of interesting because a lot of musicians, by the time they're in their 80s and 90s or even 70s or sometime in their 30s, they find what they want to do
Yeah.
and they do that, and that's a valid thing too. They polish the stone, you know. But Yusuf was he used to say, "Brother Adam, we're evolutionists." He wanted to try new things. So
Mm.
trying things means being able to give up, let go of what you've done before. And it also means being willing to deal with the possibility of failure. But it
Yeah.
also means having the inventiveness to come up with new ideas. And he never ran out of things. I mean, it was just so. For example, the first collaboration, no, the second or third collaboration we did was this piece called "The World at Peace." He had gotten a grant for a 12-piece group, and he asked me to co-compose it with him, and I was like honored, you know. So I wrote some pieces, and he wrote some pieces, but then he called me up in one day and he said, "So what I want to do is I'm going to write for six of the musicians a certain number of bars, and I'm going to tell you how many bars I wrote and the approximate tempo, and which of the six I wrote for, and I want you to write for the other six."
Mm. Wow, interesting.
He said, "And you do the same. You write for the six musicians you choose. Tell me how many bars you wrote." I mean, later we weren't even using bar lines, but we used bar lines for this one. And, you know, the tempo approximately and which musicians you. So we did that for, I think, five or six pieces and five pieces, and four of them are on the record. And it was really interesting. So until we got to the rehearsal, you didn't know what the other was going to be. This is how he thought.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You know, we did another project later where he said, "Okay, you write the first." It was for a 8-piece group. He said, "You write." This is at Lincoln Center, so big deal, right? For his 80th birthday, you write for the first 11 bars. I'm going to write the next 13 bars, and you write the next 15, and I'll write the next 70. Of this formula, and same thing. We kind of, I mean, and it's. He's always looking to, like Thelonious Monk was like that, to find a way to
Yeah.
sort of not sabotage, but keep you to
On
keep
your
you
toes. Yeah.
your own cliches, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
keep it interesting.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Yeah. Because I also wanted to ask you that, like, how I guess you partly answered, like, how do you decide where to go musically? You know, I have you on projects with, you know, Sam Rivers to Pharaoh to your own stuff, and like, you know, the moving pictures. I mean, that was one of the first ones I think I've heard by you. I had a trio like with a percussionist and a bass player, and the percussionist loved your stuff. So I think
Oh
he
wow!
got like 10 CDs. So, and we listened to Skyway a lot and all those records, and like uh, like late mid 90s. And but yeah, how do you as a musician decide where you want to go musically, right? Like to keep it interesting, I'll put it like that.
Well, there's a couple of different ways to answer that. I saw an interview with Miles, where he said, they asked him a similar question. He said, "Well, I have all these things in my mind, and the things I don't like, I take out, and the things I like, I do." You know,
Yeah.
well, that implies the idea of cultivating intuition, right? And another thing I think I learned from Yusuf and all of these mentors, which is the idea of curiosity and courage. Also, you have to have courage.
Yeah.
Um, I think I could have made other choices and been uh, worked more, for example, as a sideman, but I chose. Uh, I think it's cultivating your intuition and trusting your intuition and going all the way into something. Don't look back. Having an attitude of whatever you do in life. I mean, that's what's so amazing about these people like Sun Ra or Don Cherry or Yusef Lateef or Roland Kirk or people. They're like, they show you that whatever you do in life, that you creatively go all the way into being
Mm.
fully what it is that your inner life, your soul life leads you to do.
Yeah.
And it involves studiousness. Also, I learned from Yusuf and from the musicians in Detroit, especially, to always be studious. So that humility part means you're still always open. You're always trying new things. You're always taking a risk. You never really know completely what you're doing. Like this new quartet I have, the Sunrise Quartet. I'm trying some new things with that group, and they have to be musicians you can trust, and they're familiar with my music. They've all played in my orchestra for years. They're familiar with my concept. But it's like I said to them, I said, I'm reaching for something with this group, but I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm looking for it, and we're getting there. It's really uh um so yeah, I think the idea of anything you can imagine to do, you can do if you can imagine it. So the
Yeah.
cultivation of imagination and the cultivation of intuition and acknowledging being open, like an open vessel, so that when inspiration comes, you're ready for it,
Mm. Yeah.
right? Because inspiration, they're different than an intellectual process. So, of course, Yusuf, Coltrane, Ornette, all these, Eric Dolphy, they were great thinkers. They were very advanced ideas about working with intervals, but it has to serve the heart and the intuitive idea of what you choose. Unlike that, I can explain to you now about like what a triple diminished pattern is. I could teach it, but the intuition, it always says intuition erases its own tracks as it goes.
Yeah.
You can't go back, right? But you can cultivate your openness to it, and the more you cultivate, it's a muscle almost. So now, yeah, like I said, I have these four, four or five things that I'm sort of mixing and editing and working with, and I kind of don't know what I'm doing.
That's good.
I do and I don't. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. 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 I found it interesting because, like, with Mandingo Griot Society, like, it was like, I hate this term as well, but like world music, if we want to put it like that, and then like the moving pictures already go completely different. I think you're more and more stretching, and then with the organic orchestra, of course, even more. So I like that when I look at the albums I have, by you or listen to you. It's really nice to see this. Like you're like, okay, starting there, like kind of world music, but then like stretching it out. It's beautiful to hear that.
Well,
Nice.
I come from, I don't use the word jazz, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the tradition I grew up around. The great blues musicians, Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters, lived in my neighborhood, and got to hear them. And like I said, the art ensemble, and my father took me to hear Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and Stan Getz and Max Roach. So that's the core. So the idea in the 70s, when I was really starting to grow and expand and expose live to groups like the Art Ensemble, but also hearing Miles and
yeah,
Herbie Hancock Sextet and Weather Report and McCoy Tyner. And one of the things, all these bands, they all had this like an imperative of pushing the boundaries, Mahavishnu Orchestra, all these groups, they were pushing, and they were also beginning to listen to music from other cultures. And of course, Yusuf had been the leader in that, and then Don. So that was the impetus for me to like, wow, I think we can take this further. And let me go at that time, to learn African drumming. Now there's drummer, it's everywhere, but then it was more difficult or to find a tabla teacher, that's why I had to go to Ghana. Um, so it just felt like once you realize if you're going to spend your lifetime involved in music, then of course you want to learn everything you can about every kind of music, and to open your mind and your ears to all of it, and hear what's being said, what's being communicated.
Yeah.
And so then it comes to the question of like, okay, well, where do I sit in the middle of all this? So of course, world music, I know what you mean, but of course it's another meaningless term because
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
thinks the world, but non-Western, I mean, not, whatever, but I know what you mean, expanding. So now all of us listen to music from everywhere. We even live, and we can travel these places. So how do you find your own center in the middle of this? And my concept of that, well, I learned this word. I worked a lot with Mtume, who played percussion with
Hmm.
Miles,
Yeah.
and also became a big producer, and he was helping me remix. And he was friends with Sly Stone. And he said Sly Stone told him this word, he coined it, he called it simplexity. So what simplexity means is that, to me, a lot of different things, but one of them is that as you, like, for example, in theoretical physics, when you move into the higher dimensions beyond the third dimension, fourth dimension, the laws of physics become simpler. So in music, when we move beyond style, and whatever style it
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
called us, as we move into the higher elements, we ultimately end up at the unison of vibration, and then we're dealing with motion and color, right? So, and these things all have a uh, 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 physical basis, right, and a mathematical dynamic to them also. So when you start to look at those things and deal with pure elements that way, um, then that to me that allows you freedom.
Yeah.
Uh, Don Cherry used to say, "Style is the death of creativity," you know, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
style. Nowadays there's a lot of stylistic regurgitation. There's a lot of that's a thing, and people want to work, and I mean all these things. But we choose our path and find out what's interesting. And so it's been a challenge because I've never really fallen into like, you know, where do they go? Where does it go in the record
Yeah.
store when the record?
Exactly. That's the yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good thing though, right?
I think so. Yeah. It's like I think I spoke to Tim Byrne once, and he was also like a critic or someone. He told me he asked him like that he's an improvised or avant-garde jazz musician, and he really lost it. He was like, what the fuck, like it's but it's obviously, yeah, it's for the people who buy CDs in the store, or for jazz critics that they say like, yeah, he's a world music musician or whatever, just that they know where to file your album or something, which
Yeah.
is like you said, it's stupid, it's really
Well, you want to go to the grocery store, so you want to know where the
where
vegetables
the
are.
cheeses are, yeah, or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you used to go to record stores, you know where to go. Now, I don't know, it's a whole up for grabs. But the point is, for me, the idea is to shoot the arrow and paint the bullseye around it.
Mm,
So the idea, if you have a sense of your direction and or directions and what you want to do,
yeah.
and even if you don't have a clear sense of it, you're going for something, you're finding your way. And then in terms of how you work in the marketplace, the so-called, you figure it out,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's a different
glad
story.
to hear you're percussionist. I never knew that anybody knew uh what's the Skyway, that record.
Oh, I love that record, man.
What's that?
I love that record. We used to play that all the time. Like,
That's amazing to me. That's I
yeah,
wouldn't know that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's beautiful stuff, you know. It's but you know, like you said, following your own story, it helps. Like you having your own label as well and being able to release records, and I think that's so important that you don't have to follow someone's instructions or you know someone telling you, yeah, you have to do a record like that or that's fantastic. So
yeah. I started Meta Records in 19, I think it was 95.
really early, yeah,
Actually, kind of after that Skyway record, I was kind of like these Solno guys. I don't know this little. I think
yeah,
I
yeah,
can just and own the master, and also release it when I want, how I want. So I had done an opera actually called The Dreamer, based upon Nietzsche about the birth of tragedy.
hmm
Uh, we had made a book of illustrations, paintings, and a CD of music of it, and no record label wanted to
sure,
make that out of book and CD, so I did it, and then from there, yeah, every now and then I license things to other labels, like that one with Benny Maupin, we licensed to Strut, but I don't have to
exactly, yeah.
for wait for somebody. And now, at the time, not so many musicians had labels. Now, of course, the record industry has sort of collapsed. But it's a history. Max Roach and Charlie Mingus had their lone label, and Horace Silver, and of course Yusef, Betty Carter, and then going all the way back to W.C. Handy was maybe the first. He had Black Swan records.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
nowadays it's normal in a normal. I mean, you know, even the Dave Holland and I don't know, Dave Douglas, all these guys who are they have their own labels. I mean, everyone almost nowadays easier almost. I think with Bandcamp, Bandcamp really helps. As
It's great for me because I don't have to wait. I mean, like I said, sometimes I license things, but
yeah,
my problem is that my output, there's two problems with it. One, well, there's a few, but one of them, promotion is always a thing, but
yeah,
then it's like by the time the record comes out, I'm not so interested in it anymore.
I'm the same, man. I have a
I,
backlog of 9 masters on my computer, and I'm like, you know, shit, this was recorded 2 years ago, and I'm like, I'm
yeah.
already somewhere else, you know, or but you still want to put it out, just yeah, I guess to document where you are, or
Well, and also, I don't know what these like for example, I have this trio with Dave Liebman. The last iteration of it, I have in the can, all mixed and ready to go, with Dave Liebman and Billy Hart and myself,
wow,
right?
beautiful, man.
I know, and it's a beautiful record. I said, you know what? Let me check with a couple record labels. They're not interested, and not even to want to hear it. So I'm just like,
Interesting.
I don't know what to say to about where they might be at. These are the masters.
Exactly.
Never mind me, but Dave Liebman and Billy Hart, come on, you know. But they're just, they're whatever. So fine, I think I'm gonna put it out. We are gonna put it out together in the spring,
Beautiful.
Uh, maybe let this guy Giannis do the vinyl. We'll see, you know.
Yeah.
But the point is, you can't, as John Zorn calls it. He calls it "Mommy May I." It's a game we used to play as kids called "Mommy May I," and it's like, who wants to, you know, who wants to be into that? It's like these guys, they have their agenda. Sometimes their agenda comes together with yours,
Yeah.
but then if it doesn't, you still have to keep on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're saying, you put out your music, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I have my. I mean, I did records with labels like Fresh Sound and Steeplechase and Clean Feed, but it's gotten worse and worse. That you know, in the now you have to buy CDs from a label, right? More or less, which you know, then I print them on my own with my own label. Then it's because cost-wise, I'm the same, and I still own the masters and everything. And the labels don't do anything anymore for the promotional. So that's the second thing, you know. Then so yeah, I rather do it on my own. It's
Yeah.
way nicer, more work, but more gratifying, I think.
I love this cover we just did for the New Moon. I really enjoy the designing the covers.
Mm,
It's art. I
yeah,
enjoy it, and I enjoy uh, sometimes like this one I wrote a poem. Sometimes I might write something. Sometimes I might have somebody write something. Sometimes I use my photographs. A lot of times I use my wife is an incredible artist, so I'm very lucky that she lets me use her art sometimes. But it's just fun to kind of, you're making
Yeah,
a thing, you know.
exactly. Yeah.
I like being there for the mastering, the mixing. It's a process that I listen. There's nothing like playing a concert, you know, but also this is a beautiful process
Oh, I
too.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I do my own mixing and mastering as well. I learned that, so I really enjoy all of it. Like, but then I usually do it and I'm like, okay, chuk, let's go on. It's, but yeah, it's the process. I think, we should all enjoy more in the process.
well, the
Uh,
process of what's available to us. I mean,
yeah.
I think any composer we know or musician from the past, everybody embraces new technology. I mean, someone like, like I said, when I grew up in Chicago, musicians like Eddie Harris and Sun Ra were like
Mm,
first to really embrace electronics among them, and tape recorders and
yeah.
all these things. And so I work with Pro Tools and these records that sometimes I release a record of like the trio with the ones with Tyshawn are kind of like, this is what we did that day,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
but the new trio, a lot of recordings though, like the trio, I did a couple of trio records with Ralph Jones and Hamid Drake, the Karuna trio.
Yeah.
I do a lot of uh, looping, mixing, processing. I sort of, my little parameters that I don't bring in samples or music that we didn't make. I sort of keep
Yeah.
it indigenous or organic, but within that little universe of what's been recorded, I get creative with it, and I enjoy it. Not on every record, but some records and some more than others. Um, and It's fun, and I think it's valid. I don't think every record has to be just like a live concert
Oh yeah,
or
of course.
live in the studio. Well, there are purists who feel like it's got to be live in, that this is what you played, and I mean, people still feel like you shouldn't. Some people are against electronics still, I mean, which is their prerogative.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, well, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, but it's yeah. Nowadays, it's fun that we can do that. What we can, having
Yeah,
your own studios, and I've done so many long distance recordings during Corona, just connecting
yeah,
with players, from all over the world. Like we didn't have anything to do. I was like, shit, yeah, I'll record my guitars here. You do that, and then you listen to that album, and you're like, shit, we're almost like in the same room because we were listening kind of or leaving space, and that's a beautiful thing, that didn't exist 20 years ago, I guess, or 10 even. Or so it's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
No, it opens up. I mean, it opens up something different, and either it's at the end of the day, either it serves the heart and
Yeah.
serves the feeling and the intention, or not. But the creative process, when when you can invent and think about different kind of creative processes for yourself, that automatically opens up your music's going to be prototypical.
Mm,
The whole idea is to have, to me, is to have your music be reflective of who we are, where we're living now, you know,
yeah.
even when the resonance of it is is ancient, prehistoric actually, that the resonance of it, but it has to be reflective of this experience now.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting is that when you think about the musicians like, let's say, John Coltrane, for example, the musicians who sound the most like themselves, like a Don Cherry or
Yeah.
Sun Ra or Coltrane or Elvin Jones, for example, their music is the most universal. It taps into the most universal quality of it. And that's a very interesting phenomenon where something that is more imitative is
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
universal, resonant in that universal way.
Yeah. Yeah. So many followers, and they're forgotten in a way because they're not
Be your own
kind of
prototype.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Uh, I think you ended in such a nice way now. I don't even want to go further. It's like an impro, and it's like that's a nice climax now. So maybe I'll finish here actually. So,
Yeah,
but
no, that's whatever you want, you know.
yeah, but man, so nice to hear you talk about these things. Beautiful to share your thoughts. Nice.
I
And
should mention too, by the way, that just as a, if I don't know, people are interested, the Meta Records Bandcamp page, and it also has these two. If you were asking me about the material, so there are two books that I've released.
oh,
One
really?
is
I didn't know that. Okay.
so they're on the merch page of the Bandcamp. One is called Pure Rhythm,
Oh, I'll
and
check it
it
out.
has
Okay.
hundreds and hundreds of rhythms. There used to be a CD with it originally, but now you download the samples. There's no Western notation. It's all the way of how I notate the rhythms. And my newer book, is called Sonic Elements. So Sonic Elements has some of the rhythms. It also has a lot of the materials I developed for the organic orchestra, different kinds of interval systems. Also, no Western notation. It's all matrices, cosmograms, and also there's like 21 philosophical essays in that book that I kind of talk about my ideas. As you can tell, I'm like to wax poetic. We're interested in what is music. These things.
But
So
yeah, sure. Yeah.
so I have 21 essays in that book, scattered in that book called Sonic Elements. So if people are interested in that kind of stuff too, but also almost all the records I've done, even for other labels, because the masters like there's two Go Organic guitar or albums, and they both have come back to my ownership now. Um, so there's kind of pretty much everything in my,
That's pretty.
including Highway, by the way,
I
which
know.
it's only a download. I don't know, but that's there too. And did you hear the record before it, the one called Adam Rudolph's Moving Pictures?
Yeah, sure. That's like from 92 or 93. Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
came
yeah,
before with some of
yeah,
the
yeah.
same on it. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that stuff, man. Really, we listened to that for so much because we were trying to get. I'm in Slovenia, and in the 90s, when we got independent from Yugoslavia, there was not so much music. So if anyone had a CD, well, I copied it. So and
right,
that's the CD I was listening to like for a really long time because I didn't have so much music. So it's
right.
quite interesting. It was rare for us to get some music that
I'd love to come
fresh.
there. I'd love to come there. I've never been, and I'm always like to go to places where there's a good vibe from the people. And I I'm actually going to be in doing a residency in the Czech Republic
Oh,
in
really?
August. Uh,
Oh, let me know. Well, that's 5 hours from me. We have a guest room here. You can come here. We have a studio. We could play or whatever if you
yeah,
like it. So you're invited.
that'd be great. All right, man.
Cool,
Really
Adam.
nice to meet you, and
You too.
send me an email when keep me posted. Also, I'm happy if you feel like sending. Now I'm sort of curious and intrigued about your music.
I will.
So
I'll send you some links.
give me some links, yeah, because that'd be fun to kind of know
I will.
you in another way, right?
Cool. I will do. Thanks so much, man.